Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteus and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. A state of emergency has been declared in Los Angeles as wildfires spread to nearly 3,000 acres. Over 30,000 residents have so far been evacuated, with winds causing the fire to rip through the county. Incoming US President Donald Trump has refused to rule out using military or economic action to pursue the acquisition of the Panama Canal and Greenland. He also promises to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Donald Trump has also stated that all hell will break out in the Middle East if Israeli hostages are not released by his inauguration. Meanwhile, US military aid allocated to Egypt is being shifted to Lebanon. Russian troops have captured the frontline town of Kurakhove in the Donetsk region, with recent reports suggesting the town of Shevchenko has also been taken. Though Ukraine say fighting is still ongoing, these latest captures bring Russia closer to the key logistical hub of Pokrovsk. Russia claims that its forces have captured the frontline town of Kurakhove in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region. The town has borne the brunt of Russian advances in recent months and is a stepping stone to the key logistical hub of Pokrovsk. Ukraine has not acknowledged the fall of Kurakhove, which is 35 kilometers south of Pokrovsk. Fierce fighting has also been underway in Russia's Kursk region in the recent days after Ukraine launched a counterattack on Sunday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Moscow had suffered big losses in 5 months of fighting in the Kursk region, with nearly 15,000 killed. He made no mention of Kurakhove. The Russian ministry said taking Kurakhove, which had held out for many weeks, would enable its forces to boost the pace of their advances in Ukraine's Donetsk region. It is also said it had captured Dachenchek, a village 5 miles from Pokrovsk. Ukraine has not revealed details of the new offensive it launched in the Kursk on Sunday, though a senior Ukrainian official said it was getting what it deserves. Zelensky said Ukrainian forces had established a buffer zone and inflicted heavy losses in the Kursk, preventing Moscow from deploying its troops in key areas of the Eastern Front. Aditya, we are joined by Aditya Wadawan, our correspondent. What can you tell me about these recent updates in the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, recently Russia has, captured some of the Donetsk region in Ukraine, which has brought it more closer to Kyiv, as you mentioned. This has been going on. Vladimir Putin has been making statements. Vladimir Putin has been making statements that he's ready to make compromises on the Ukraine war, but not on the position of weakness, on the position of strength. So, as per some reports, Donald Trump has even, the US President-elect Donald Trump has also justified Russia's invasion of Ukraine recently. And, this war is seeing no end, no end in sight. This war has been going for about 2.5 years, 2.5 to 3 years. The war has been going non-stop, so there is no end to the war as of now. Yes, Tom, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Aditya. For a discussion on this topic, we are joined by Dr. Sergei Dvorinov, Director Communication of BRICS Culture Media Forum, Gilbert Doctorow, Russian affairs expert located in Brussels, Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee, former diplomat. Thank you for joining us on this discussion. Sergei, I wanted to come to you first. There is a lot of talk about this town of Kurakhove. Russia says that it has claimed it. Ukraine has not confirmed this. What can you tell me about the importance of this territory?
Yes, good evening, namaste, namaskar. Like you already mentioned, that is very close to the logistic hub, Pokrovsk. And I just want to remind that eastern part of Ukraine, Donetsk region, is originally was Russian territory and Russian land. And during USSR time, Mr. Khrushchev gave this, joined this land to Ukraine. It was his own choice and his decision. And that's why we have such kind of problems, that our national leader Vladimir Putin should protect population, which is mostly Russian-speaking population, with all traditional values of Russian civilization. And right now it's very significant after Christmas, Orthodox Christmas, which was yesterday. We achieved, it's very significant not only tell about some military achievement. We should tell that right now we can see in Ukraine army, they lost already the spirit of win, spirit of fighting, because they completely recognized and understand and realized as well that Mr. Zelensky, who is not legal president of Ukraine, you know this very well, he was not re-elected. During his election, by the time he promised to his nation that he will bring peace to Ukraine. And in history, everybody, when will tell the name of Zelensky, they will tell it was a president who completely cheat his nation and bring war, not peace, but war to the country, unfortunately. And Mr. Zelensky was not invited to Donald Trump inauguration, which is a very important signal. And right now, it's not only loss of Ukrainian army, it's also like kind of demoralization of all the nation, where everybody only just keep in mind one question: who will be after Zelensky? Who will be next president responsible and honest and even not belong to some entertainment or show? Because the mind and life experience of Mr. Zelensky is only, before it was only like a show. He's a comedian. He is not related to any politics, no any like skills in this field. That's why we can see that it's a big tragedy. But for us, for Russia, again, it's according to systematical plan of our national leader Vladimir Putin.
Gilbert, Doctor, I wanted to move on to you next. Ukraine has launched new attacks in the Kursk region, or so it says. It has not released any information about these attacks, this offensive. How is Russia handling this? What does it aim to achieve with this?
Well, Russia has stymied the counterattacks, according to the latest information from their sources. But I think it is important that you bring up this question of Kursk, because the general public doesn't know this town or that town, Kurakhove or Pokrovsk, doesn't tell the general audience for this program very much. Let me insist that this is the largest war in Europe since World War II. And those who think of Ukraine as a third world country are missing the point entirely. Ukraine was, at the start of this war, probably the strongest army in Europe, second to Russia. It had been prepared by NATO instructors. It had been stuffed to the gills with NATO arms. It was prepared for a devastating attack on the Donbass. This is what precipitated the Russian attack in February to prevent a genocide of the Russian-speaking population in Donbass by that very massive and well-armed Ukrainian army. So what we're seeing now, despite all of the progress that Russia has made in beating back Ukraine, in moving beyond the fortifications that Ukraine had created in the neighborhood of the capital of Donetsk province, in the 8 years that they were being trained and armed by NATO countries. Russia has pushed way beyond that and has now approached and passed the middle point geographically in the Donbass, particularly in the Donetsk Oblast or region. They have now, when they approach Pokrovsk, which they will rename Krasnoarmeysk, they are beyond 60%, and they have a free road to the Dnieper River, which divides Ukraine in two. I say that because the activities of the Russian army have been to give the relentless attacks, which give the Ukrainians no chance to fall back and create new defensive positions. So the Russians have opposed any ceasefire and will, since they are moving constantly, advancing and preventing the Ukrainians from creating strong defensive positions. The war is approaching its conclusive phase. The Russian population is aware of that and anticipates victory. There is nothing that the incoming Trump administration can do to influence or change the policies of Moscow, which are that of the victorious side in a conflict which was at the wish of the European Union and the United States to be decided on the field of battle. It is being decided on the field of battle, but it's a very tough fight, and that has to be emphasized. The Russians have a very high advantage in artillery shells, artillery pieces, missiles, compared to Ukraine. They have a very big advantage in manpower compared to, on the front, compared to Ukraine. But the Ukrainians are fighting, despite all the stories that we know of desertions, the fact that 1,700 Ukrainian soldiers trained in France came back as a brigade and disappeared into the population to avoid going to the front. We know those facts, but we also know the facts of the reality of the counterattacks that you described at the start of this program. And as I say, this is a vicious battle, a vicious war, and no one should underestimate the extreme passions on both sides. Russia is now the strongest military force in Europe and possibly in the world, given everything that it has learned in the nearly 3 years of war, in which the latest technologies of all sides have been brought to bear in the battlefield.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to bring in Ambassador Baswati Mukhadi, just because we are running out of time. Where did you see the war as heading in the next few months? We are obviously approaching a Trump 2.0 administration. Is there any chance of a stable peace agreement soon?
Thank you. I'd first like to begin by saying that looking at it from India's perspective in Delhi, we look at the war in Ukraine as a proxy war fought by NATO with Russia. That's the way we look at it. From that perspective, it hasn't exactly gone the way NATO wanted it, because when they kept on provoking President Putin by saying that Ukraine will become a NATO member, it was very clear to everyone that at that point of time, Ukraine did not have the necessary qualifications either to join the European Union or NATO, but it was just a question of pushing or pulling, or whatever way you want to put it, the bear's tail as hard as they could, the way we refer to the Chinese as the dragon. So here, you're pulling the tail of the bear maybe a little too hard, and the conflict started, and it didn't go the way NATO wanted. It went to a certain extent. They were able to use Ukrainians as a proxy to test their weapons, to see how far they could go, to see how far they could provoke a nuclear weapon state with a non-nuclear weapon state, etc. As my Russian colleague has said, the territories that have been captured by the Russian army are traditional Russian territories which go into the very heart of Russian civilization, of Russian literature, of Russian poetry. They were handed over to Ukraine. It was a strategic error. Moreover, when the former USSR was disbanded, it was on the basis of the Minsk agreements. There were certain red lines drawn up, which the West and the Russians were supposed to respect. That was not done. Now the question is, in India, how do we look at the prospect? We see the prospect of Ukraine as a defeated country, holding on to a little bit of Russian territory for compensation, because it is clear that when there will be a peace agreement, unfortunately, Ukraine will have to live with territory that it has parted with forcibly in a war which NATO could not win for them. In the process, as my colleague in Brussels has rightly pointed out, the Russian army has experienced how a modern war is fought. We all have actually, so has India. We have watched very closely the role that drones play, etc. This has actually been the age of dispelling innocence of how new wars are to be fought in the 21st century. It's been an educative experience for all countries, including India, which have hostile neighbors on their territory, on their borders. I see this war coming to a rapid conclusion. I agree with my Belgian colleague. I see the Ukrainians, naturally, from their perspective, trying to hold on to whatever little Russian territory they've been able to capture as a bargaining chip. That's quite normal too. I don't see this war continuing. I agree with my Belgian colleague, but I don't see it as a victory either for NATO or for Ukraine. But yes, like the so-called WMDs in Iraq of Saddam Hussein, it gave the West an opportunity to test out their latest weapons. They always like to do that. It gave a boom to their armaments industry. That's what capitalism is all about. I think now we're all tired of this war, and I personally would welcome it to come to an end, because as a result of this war, people are forgetting what is happening in Gaza, which is unfortunate. If the Ukraine conflict would come to an end, we could then focus on ending also the conflict in Gaza and the distressing images that come every day of women and children dying in Gaza.
Thank you very much. We've run out of time, unfortunately. Thank you to all our guests for joining us. We will now take a look at some more news updates from across the world. A new chapter begins in Syria as Damascus airport reopens for international flights after over a decade. Families reunite and passengers celebrate the changes after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Let's take a look at the report.
After over a decade of isolation, Damascus airport buzzes with life. The first international flights have resumed following the ousting of President Bashar al-Assad by Islamist-led rebels last month. History was made on December 18th, when a flight from Damascus took off for Aleppo. It marked the first domestic flight since the regime's fall. A Qatari commercial flight soon followed, landing in Damascus for the first time in nearly 13 years.
أنا هون مطار دمشق الدولي عم بنتظر أخي له غايب عن سوريا 17 سنة كان ما يحسن يجي بسبب الظروف اللي كانت بسبب النظام ما كان يحسن ينزل فاستغل أول فرصة وأول فرحة ينزل لهون على سوريا بأول طائرة قطرية يعني كان هو عم ينتظر فارغ الصبر إنه ينزل.
Inside the airport, joy is palpable. Families reunite with tears, laughter and celebrations, carrying balloons and flowers to welcome loved ones. Passengers noted a striking change in the atmosphere. Many praise the airport staff for their warm and welcoming demeanor, something they say was absent during the Assad regime.
بس اليوم غير شكل يعني كان اليوم كتير ما بعرف المطار الموظفين كل شيء غير شكل يعني كانوا يعاملونا بفوقية كتير كانوا كتير لا هلا غير يعني حتى المعاملة يعني بالابتسامة كانت.
Airport officials celebrated the reopening as a milestone. Damascus Airport Director Anis Falo called it a new beginning, highlighting the arrival of aid and official delegations in recent days. With Syrian Air resuming operations and other airlines set to follow, the skies over Syria are reopening. For many, it is a step towards rebuilding connections severed by years of conflict. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We will now take a look at some news updates from the Indo-Pacific region. A powerful earthquake has hit Tibet, killing at least 126 and injuring over 100. Tremors were felt in Nepal, Bhutan and northern India. The quake, measuring at 7.1, struck Dingri County near Mount Everest. The area is home to about 62,000 people. Chinese state media reports over 1,000 homes were damaged. Many buildings near the epicenter have collapsed. The quake struck at a depth of 10 kilometers early Tuesday morning. Rescue efforts are underway. A former Cambodian opposition MP has been shot dead in Bangkok. Lim Kim Ya, 74, a member of the exiled Cambodia National Rescue Party, was killed soon after arriving from Cambodia. He was travelling with his French wife and uncle. The CNRP has condemned the attack, calling it an assassination. Lim Kim Ya, a dual Cambodian-French national, stayed in Cambodia despite threats. Many other opposition leaders fled after the party's dissolution in 2017. The CNRP described his death as brutal as inhumane. Thai authorities are investigating the killing. Former Mauritius Finance Minister Renganaden Payachaque has been barred from leaving the country. Authorities warned he would be arrested if he attempts to flee. The case involves an alleged embezzlement of $1 million from the Mauritius Investment Corporation. The funds reportedly went to a polling company before last year's elections. The payment was allegedly ordered by former central bank governor Harvesh C. Golam, who was arrested last week but later released on bail. Padayachi is expected to face questioning soon. 3 soldiers and 90 militants have been killed in clashes in Pakistan's northwest. The military says intense firefights erupted at 3 locations in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, a province near the Afghan border. Pakistan blames the Taliban-led Afghan government for harboring militants staging cross-border attacks. Kabul denies the claims. The Pakistani Taliban, or TTP, remains the region's most active militant group. The country has seen a surge in violence with over 1,300 casualties reported in 2024 alone. Papua New Guinea is working to extradite rugby player Kevin Appo, charged with rape and assault in the UK. Appo, 25, reportedly fled to Britain after being granted bail in late November. He returned home to PNG just hours after his release. The Foreign Minister says the government will not shelter citizens charged with crimes abroad. UK authorities are yet to formally request Appo's extradition. He was a player for the Bradford Bulls in Britain's Rugby League. A seaplane crash near Rottnest Island, Western Australia, has claimed 3 lives. The victims include a Swiss woman, a Danish man, and the Australian pilot. 4 others, including tourists, survived, were rescued. The crash occurred shortly after takeoff on Tuesday evening. Reports suggest the plane may have hit a rock, but investigations are ongoing. Western Australia Premier Roger Cook called the incident heartbreaking. Rottnest Island is a popular tourist destination 30 kilometres from Perth. A ferocious wildfire in Los Angeles has devoured buildings and sparked panicked evacuations. This comes after hurricane-force winds tore through the region. Hundreds of firefighters have now swarmed the area, attacking the blaze from the ground and the air, while crews work through steep terrain to cut back vegetation and create fire breaks. Let's have a look at this report.
Frightened residents in Los Angeles abandoned their cars, fleeing on foot, as ferocious wildfires in the suburbs devoured buildings and homes. A 3,000-acre blaze engulfed area packed with multi-million-dollar homes in the Santa Monica Mountains. Hundreds of firefighters swarmed the area to control the blaze from the ground and the air. Bulldozers are being used to push dozens of vehicles, including expensive models such as BMWs, Teslas and Mercedes, to one side, leaving many crumpled and with their alarms blaring. Around 30,000 people were ordered to evacuate the fast-spreading flames, which leveled multiple homes as powerful winds spread embers far and wide. US President Joe Biden, who was in Los Angeles for a planned announcement on new national monuments, said he was being frequently briefed on the wildfires and has offered any federal assistance that is needed. The fire came as the area was being hit by seasonal Santa Ana winds that forecasters said could develop into the worst windstorm in a decade, with gusts of up to 100 miles an hour expected. California Governor Gavin Newsom said President Biden has approved federal aid to help firefighters respond to the conflagration. The 2024 California wildfire season was a series of wildfires that burned throughout the U.S. state of California. By the end of the year, a total of 8,024 wildfires burned a cumulative 1,050,012 acres. Wildfires are an expected part of life in the U.S. West and play a vital role in nature. But scientists say human-caused climate change is altering weather patterns. Bureau Report, NewsX.
That is all we have time for now. We will be back with more international news updates.